Hello and welcome to Shem 2.0, class number 2. I'm Rabbi David Katz. We picked up last week after a couple-year layoff for developing new concepts and ideas in many Torah areas and genres. And as we said last week, we're back for Shem 2.0 with all intents and purposes for this being a long, healthy, hearty series of Torah. We introduced for a long time last week, so let's not beat around the bush. Let's get down to business. I want to start off this week to begin to introduce to everybody, as I quoted in my notes, what is ancient wisdom, right? We want to know what is ancient wisdom. There is wisdom, as many of you don't even know today what wisdom is. I've had discussions the last couple of weeks with people, what is wisdom to you? My mother thinks it's what you get in school, a basic school education. They give you wisdom. I beg to differ. My argument is that in schools today we don't have wisdom. They don't teach wisdom. I just finished a book, my personal reading of the Oxford Encyclopedia of the English Language, and I'll give you an example from that book of what I think wisdom is, or what it isn't. I'm sure everybody out there has done some work with Shakespeare. You being from England probably know all about it. You're probably a Bucky, right? Shakespeare, there's an objective personality of who Shakespeare was. Who I think he was, based on 10th grade English class in Centerville, Ohio. Shakespeare was annoying. It was a project everyone had to do. We had to pretend to like it. And say things like, "Where art thou?" which no one knew what it meant. And we were told to basically say, this is great, this is poetic, this is wonderful literature, I feel enlightened, I'm 10 degrees smarter than I was yesterday, blah, blah, blah. Then in college, I took a more English, obviously, prerequisite, and I remember learning Midsummer's Night Dream. I actually kind of liked Midsummer's Night Dream. But I think I like the movie more than the book when they show us the movie part. So it's not safe to say I ever liked Shakespeare. Fast forward to 2015, and I finished this book. Let me give you the Cambridge or Oxford edition of who Shakespeare was. The English language was being developed in the Jewish timeline, the era of the Rishonim, right? In the late Gonim, late 800-900s toward thousands, culminating in the Shakespearean time in the mid 15th century ish, 16th century, 1580. So that whole era was. I'm focusing on the larger era of where English was going through a bit of a renaissance. So when I say Shakespeare in that timeline, I'm not saying exactly him, but what he himself did. In that era of time, which again, the Rishonim Tekufa, English became large for a couple of reasons, aside from the obvious. And those reasons are that you wouldn't have thought of necessarily. Translation of the Bible into English, that introduced a huge growth and spike of loan words, or brought from religiosity into the vernacular, common vernacular. Conquering lands, all of Europe essentially was conquered by English. It is an imperial language. So you have French, Latin, Spanish, Germanic, all of the languages coming into English very quickly, very swiftly coming in. Then you had, to quote you, a chap named Shakespeare, a clever chap, and he introduced, a powerful amount of English into the English language as the New Testament itself. It was that great. And the book lists words that we have today from Shakespeare, words that you use every day, and there are words that he brought in Shakespearean context that you don't use, which is funny. If you look at the list, it's words that look like they could be words, but they never made it into the language. It's like when the Super Bowl team loses, the one team wins and one loses, right? The losing team had T-shirts made up should they have won. So in what year? Let's say 1994, the San Diego Chargers lost to the San Francisco 49ers. There were shirts that made, "Way to go, Chargers. Woohoo, you guys are the best." And then in Africa, the kids are running around wearing Chargers or world champion. That's how it is. So those are the Shakespearean words, and that you can find them on the internet with context and definitions of what they meant to Shakespeare. So there's a brilliance to Shakespeare. I mean, from a wisdom point of view, that's fantastic knowledge. That there's a concept of word, like man created the language from plays, and the language is greater than man. The travels of the natural paths of language. It's just a fantastic study, lexicology and linguistics, not in terms of how to be a grammar Nazi, but what is language? How does it work? The philosophy of language. I think we looked it up. Semantics. It's the wisdom of semantics. Then you're going back to ancient Greece. Rhetoric, the seven wisdoms of the world. Rhetoric and the semantics and the arithmetic, astronomy, all these things. And the Pythagoras philosophy system came out of that. And Aristotle. I mean, I'm not getting into the philosophy of Greece, but Pythagoras, they say his tradition came from Ezekiel. So it's always backed by a strong Hebrew system at the end of the day. Now, Aristotle and Socrates, that's already Greek. But the Etzem of Greece, the Bible, New Testament, was taken from the Hebrew Chumash. Right? So their culture got infused with Torah, Lashon HaKodesh. So there's an amazing storyline always oscillating with history and the holiness of the world. So Shakespeare comes with a tremendous wisdom. It's not just some great prose and blah, 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 and wow. That's not even pshat. Pshat is there's a guy who introduced great amounts of English to the language, and when you study it from a wisdom point of view and look up what Shakespeare's words were in the context about how he knew all these things, it's incredible. So with that said, that's wisdom, or an aspect of wisdom. What it is not is great literature. Great literature is, what is great literature? Does great literature even exist? As I study the book, I saw great literature is the mastery of the language and the usage of idiomatic phraseology. That's what great literature is. When the author knows the psychology and the language go together of what he's trying to convey. Now, Shakespeare was great literature, okay? But you have to have a bit of a shpikelka to know great literature. You have to know wisdom to know great literature. And we're going to get into that today. How is the Torah itself great literature? No, it is not great literature as terms of devoid of wisdom. Now, if you have an appreciation of wisdom, then you can say Shakespeare is great literature, right? But it's at that point, it's an academic study. It's getting dictionaries and looking up terms because you don't know half the words he's using because they never made it into your English language. So if you're going to appreciate it and call it literature, don't you think you should know what the words mean? And I can sit here too and say, what do you say? In my own words, as George Carlin has a joke. He says, people say things that make no sense. In my own words. What do you mean in my own words? But that no one does that. So Shakespeare actually had his own words. And in his own words, he created from the Latin etymology, the context, and all these things that he knew how to formulate English. He had the wisdom of English to formulate it. Now, is that wisdom? Or is that just, what they teach you in 7th grade English class? Okay. So now we can appreciate that there's something in the world called wisdom, and there's something in the world called not wisdom that looks like wisdom. What we're going to do today is learn what is the ancient wisdom. The Shem series will be a study, case in point, of the ancient wisdom and how it looks like versus today's wisdom and anti-wisdom. Let's go. Many people think, as the party line goes, that wisdom began, you could say, one of two schools of thought. Moses at Sinai with the Torah. Until then, there was no wisdom in the world. Is that a correct statement? No, it isn't. There was a guy named Abraham. And they say, oh, Abraham was the father of modern monotheism. Right? Is that a true statement? No, it is not. Adam believed in one God. Hanoch believed in one God. Noah believed in one God. Shem believed in one God. Aver believed in one God. There's an entire school of wisdom from Adam in the garden to this very office right now, right? And the next 5 minutes from now and forever from now, wisdom always was in creation. There's always been wisdom on planet Earth. Now, wisdom has been in exile since its creation on planet Earth. That is the task of mankind, to embrace wisdom, embolden themselves with wisdom, staple wisdom into our lives. That is effectively called Geula Shlema. When the redemption happens, it's because wisdom found its way to our planet forever. As they call it in Texan Kabbalah, Mohin the Godlut. As they say it in normative Judaism, Mochin the Godless. As they say in proper pronunciation, Mochin the Godlut. When the intellect, the shefa of wisdom, the mind of God, comes down in the torrent of blessings, thought, good, quality, holy thought. I'm not saying thinking like, hey, I should pay the bills tomorrow and buy some yogurt, That's not thoughts, that's babble. A proper thought is wisdom. When the first man decided to make a well, and he said, aha! They knew there was water underground. He put a thing and a ding and a ding and pull it, and ding and a ding, then you have water. That whole aha moment was wisdom, was a thought that came in. The idea to pave and make a road was an aha moment, a thought that came down as a shefa. The combustible engine to run on those roads, the train, the microchip, language development, Shakespeare, proper wisdom thoughts of divine shefa coming down. Those types of thoughts have always been a part of mankind, but they have never been fully embraced by mankind, and mankind has been holocausted, that's my own made-up word, over those things. Cain and Abel was case in point. They had the whole world to develop, and it became a point of, who owns the wisdom? Where's the wisdom going to go? Bottom line is, there's always been wisdom. Now let's look at Adam. Where did Adam get his wisdom from? Did he just have wisdom? No. Nobody is born as the second coming of you-know-who. That's not how wisdom works. Wisdom is an indoctrination, meaning there is an inner light, an or panimi, inner light, and an outer light, or makif. So right now, I am thinking about things as an or panimi. It's just my internal soul. But is that the, I'm going to ask you, is that the true reality of this class right now? There's an or panimi, and that's it? No. By definition, you are here. You are an or makif. By you being here, you have a whole orbital in your life that you're bringing into this office once a week. So we talk for about a good hour or so before we set up the class. I'm absorbing his wisdom for an hour. We've been doing this since 2008, which means that there's a chemistry of two lives coming together to bubble up wisdom for inspiration to make it happen. Now, does it have to be videographer? It could be somebody else also. This is our lives in general. The bottom line is, as King Solomon says, the wisdom comes into you, but the makib patish of wisdom is it has to come back at you, which Pythagoras calls the psyche. That is the psyche. It's beyond you and it comes into you always. That's why the oral Torah is from mouth to mouth, to student and teacher. You learn Torah in pairs. Not because of some other reason, but wisdom must come from beyond you for it to be proper wisdom. And it must be consistent to a school of thought. I happen to know the videographer belongs to a school of wisdom. He is a guy that believes in the same school of wisdom as I do. Agreed? We may not see everything the same way or know the same things, but we prescribe to the same school of wisdom. If I for some reason change directions or in a theoretical universe don't believe in this, then I would have a different videographer, so to speak, and we would have a shared point of view. Everything you do is along these lines. But the point is, where did Adam get his inspiration? Where was his Ormakif? Where was the psyche coming into him? The angel gave to him Sefer Raziel, the Kabbalah book from the angel Raziel, which, by the way, if you rearrange the letters, Raziel spells Arizal. So that's interesting. So Adam had the wisdom of the garden delivered to him in the garden. Much like the Matrix film, Neo is in the office, the garden. Neo is your Adam, right? Neo's a smart guy, right? They knew him. Hey, we're watching you, Neo. You're pretty cool. You're hacking stuff, Neo. He had his inner wisdom. But Morpheus delivers the phone. There's an outside influence challenging Neo. Are you going to go out through Smith or the scaffolding? I.e., are you going to rely on your own wisdom? Or are you going to allow wisdom to come and penetrate you and enlighten you? That's just how the world works. So Adam had his own wisdom. He had the external wisdom. He had his Neo moment. He chose Agent Smith, i.e., an elongation, a time period, 6,000 years to fix the problem. And that's what Adam is doing now. Right? The Adam Kadmon, in the highest world in Kabbalah, is working through an elongated moment to fix history. That's another example of Mochen the Godless in Kabbalah. One little thought elongated into thoughts, a proper divine thought. 6,000 years of creation, when the story is told, will be one divine thought of God. So there was Adam, and he had his school of wisdom. And the world began intelligently with Adam. Then you can move on to characters like Hanoch. You might call him Enoch, right? Hanoch, what became the angel Metatron. Hanoch is essentially fixed the world. He knew the wisdom of the world. He taught it. What does it mean he became Metatron? It means that he understood the power of God in this world, synonymous with the name of God, Elohim, 86 in Gematria, the same as that as Teva, nature. Hanoch understood that you can take boring stuff and elevate the consciousness to what's called Metatronic consciousness. Abraham was the master of this. Flesh and blood, if you raise it up from Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida, you realize that the soul expands the universe. So, just to dramatize, and I'll explain this later on, a pen, you could call, let me think of a good term. I want to use like a Harry Potter imagery, like a wand. Can you understand the imagery? Oh, it's a wand. It's not a pen, it's a magical device. Meaning, when you put pen to parchment, write a Sefer Torah, is that a pen and a piece of paper? No, it's a scribe. What do you call that thing that the scribes use? Quill? Was it in Sophros? Whatever it is, a Sofer uses a special pen with special wisdom on special parchment to create a Sefer Torah, which is now holy. Right? I am flesh and blood, but when I wear tefillin, right, if you understand the mitzvah and the effect it has on you and the universe, you elevate the spirituality. If you know what it is in wisdom. Now, basic emunah, okay, you can have that too. But the people like Abraham and Hanoch understood how to take the power of divine wisdom and emanate it through the universe. It is that powerful. And I can prove it to you. If the backside in their sciences can manipulate the universe, and they can do strong things. Look, a nuclear blast can tell you the beginning of how powerful man is with his wisdom. So on the flip side, with holy wisdom, all the more so you can fill the universe. It's that simple. Then we can move on to Noah. Noah, obviously, the ark. We don't need to speak much longer about that. I think everyone knows the greatness of Noah's wisdom and craftsmanship. Ultimately, to our friend Shem, whose cave is right downstairs. Shem is a little bit different than Hanoch. Hanoch, Enoch, if you want to say it that way, understood the wisdom of the garden. You can call it Eden. Garden of Eden versus Eden, the real wisdom. Where Shem is different is he made it a Torah. Right? When we first got the camera, we were just kind of playing around, right? But hey, call it this, the thing, pull it out, crank it a little bit, right? And we got it right. It was all right. Tonight, in our little session, we wrote the Torah of the camera. Because we've been doing this now with the camera this way a couple of years. We understood tonight the lens, a millimeter makes a difference. What is a good tripod? I used to think, hey, expensive, sturdy, good. No. The crank has to be lasting longer than 6 months. The crank-it, the knobs. A cheap one, the crank goes. When you touch it, it goes down. Right? So we wrote the Torah. We're taking notes. Okay, buy the good crank, buy the good knob, sturdy legs, not so important. Millimeter lens makes a difference, right? Big difference than just saying, hey, I have a natural knack of knowing these things. Now, some things you can do in this world with a natural knack. You know, I'm pretty good at setting up my computer thing. You know, I know how it goes. But I can't claim to be an expert. Shem becomes the expert. There's a Torah. He understands the Torah of wisdom. Aver, his grandson, is the final level before Abraham, understands the language of the Torah, the holiness of the Torah, how to say it, how to phrase it, phraseology, philosophy of it, the school of the Torah. You may call that the yeshiva, Shem, and Aver. The school of the Torah of wisdom. Whereas Chanoch was wisdom. Adam was the beginning and founder of wisdom. You can say it like this too. There's somebody who invented basketball. Michael Jordan was the greatest at basketball. LeBron James was the Torah of basketball. And, what's to say, Kyrie Irving, his understudy in the Cavs, he is the one that will define greatness by playing with LeBron if you hold by just the sake of the analogy. Through history, just to focus on Aver, it was asked to me, what's the story with Aver? Isn't that kind of like a rant? Like, why Aver and not somebody else? I mean, there's a long lineage of Shem in the Torah. Why Aver? The answer is, Aver named his son Peleg, which stood for the Haflaga, the dispersion of all the peoples. Aver had the wisdom, prophetic wisdom, to name his child, to say, in your time, this will happen, and your name is the stamp of that. It happened. So you see that the idea of names and prophecies of names, and then you can elevate, the gods' names themselves become a prophetic study. The Kabbalah then comes from there. Prophetic wisdom and knowledge comes from there. The school of Shem and Aver was the Kabbalah prophecy school of all time. All through history, we have, just kind of on a side note, Gerim, who have accentuated greatness in this kind of thinking. For example, a lot of people don't give the credit where credit is due to Terach, Abraham's father. He's kind of a hidden ger, lost in time. Jethro, people think he's a convert. He represents something of a lost knowledge of who he was, what he represented. The Kenites, the Rechabites. So to say, okay, Aver is some kind of strange, one-off, relative Hashem, that's not exactly true. There's a school of people that are like Aver, Rechabites, Kenites, Jethro, Terach, all kinds of hidden, they're basically ger. By the pre-Sinai, there are these people also. It's called the Torah of Tohu, pre-Abraham. That's what we're saying. The school of wisdom always was, and there are always in time people who subscribe to the school of wisdom. Today, ger proper is not about ger toshav living in the land of Israel and the Rambam. It's about keeping the wisdom alive and teaching the wisdom to those in the continuum of the world's wisdom. There's the yeshiva of Shem and Aver that always was, always is, always will be, and there are people who are enrolled in its academy. There are those that want to know what Shakespeare really was as opposed to a cheesy class in high school. Rov Olam does not want wisdom. And that's fine. But there's a sect of exiled wisdom people that demand wisdom. Call that Shem and Aver. Call that Aver himself. Call that the school of Ger. Ger are recognized by God through wisdom. Noahide, for that matter, are more interested in being recognized by Jews, rabbis, the institution, period. Big difference. Why do you get good grades in school? To be recognized by a college. That's fine. Some people don't want recognized. They want wisdom to be able to recognize reality. We'll call that Ger, call that men of wisdom. There's our new book, The World of the Ger. And in our book, there's a chapter called the Torah of Shem. When I started teaching Ger, the first thing I ever did was the 34 classes Torah of Shem. There we go. I want to read just a highlight of the Torah of Shem chapter for those who haven't read the book yet or know of the book, just to give a taste of what we talk about in the Torah, in the world of the Ger, about the Torah of Shem. Rabbi Joseph Caro, author of the Shulchan Aruch, Code of Jewish Law, said that the Torah of Shem is the Or HaGanuz, the hidden light, and the light of the house of David. On the first day of creation, when God said, "Let there be light," it was not a physical light. The sun and the moon were not in the heavens until the fourth day. It was the holy light of the Shekhinah, the revelation of God. This radiant light continued shining until the night following the first Sabbath, when it was hidden away for the righteous. This is the Or HaGanuz, the hidden light. The Midrash says that Noah was mauled by a hungry lion that was not fed on time. And so Noah's son Shem ran to the Garden of Eden to get a cure for his father's wounds. While in the garden, by the way, this means he elevated his mind by the names of God to get the wisdom to figure out how to heal Noah. He elevated it in wisdom. But Rashi states in the Talmud Chagiga, by Koach Shem, name of God. So Shem's name was his own prophecy. Shem ran to the Garden of Eden to get a cure for his father's wounds. While in the garden, he ate from the tree of life and drank from the well springs the water, the tree of life. Shem returned with a healing balm for his father, and he also returned with the Torah, which is the tree of life. As it says in Proverbs 3:18, it is a tree of life for those who grasp it. The Torah that Shem received in the Garden of Eden was the Or HaGanuz, and the light of the house of David, light that is hidden for the righteous, as the Baal Shem Tov taught in a parallel story. And the chapter goes on. So now I want to introduce the rest of the class today, a little bit about the ancient wisdom. Several points that are of interest. Pay attention. We mentioned the difference between Chanoch, Enoch, and Shem. As we mentioned already, that Chanoch had the wisdom imbued in him, that his reality changed. He saw reality change God in creation was not completely concealed from him as it is for those without wisdom. He understood how to interface with God. Shem, as we said, recognized the Torah of how to interface with God. Wisdoms of how to interface with God. Hanoch would go to a stream and have the wisdom, is it clean water or not clean water? Is this water you can drink? Is this water that is not able to be consumed? Then he would say, drinkable water must be a tree of life. The well springs of the tree of life. The contaminated water is, let's say, the nachash, the snake of the garden. Thus, the clean water must have healing properties. Contaminated water, not healing properties. And he would elevate the wisdoms all the way to the point of the metaphysical. Understood? Shem had a different aspect. Shem understood how to apply wisdom. To make concise wisdoms. Okay, he would say that there's a concept called mikvah. Mikvah. Holy water that can purify, and when you dunk in it, there's a healing property. It's, he would call it by the name of a mitzvah. Just put a big label on it called ikar, principle. There's an ikar in the world called mikvah. Shem would say there's something in the world called tzitzit, right? Fringes, four corners. And the natural wisdom of it is such that when you look at tzitzis, the mitzvah, it looks weird. You got to wrap a string around. You say, how do you do it? If I told you have to make your own tzitzis, which people do, you say, I don't know. I don't know how it's going to stay together. It's going to fall apart. I made my first tzitzis not long ago. Usually I just buy them. And I saw the wisdom works. Do you have computers at home? You have a lot of cords? Do they easily tangle? Why? Isn't it amazing? Like you throw a couple cords together, they tangle. I always yell and say, Kalim, how can it be? I just laid it down. All of a sudden, it's like, are you serious? There's a wisdom in cables. Just a natural, it's like gooey. It's on it. You can't get it off. Tzitzis has that same wisdom. The strings are cables. Strings, cords. So just like when you tangle your computer cables, when you wrap a cable around a cable, i.e. your strings for tzitzis, you have a string, you pull them out, and you wrap one time, 2 times. What do? They stick. Why do they stick? Just like your computer cables stick, there's a natural wisdom called channels, cords, stick. No explanation. That's just what they do. Why do fingernails, when they go along, they curve? That's what they do. Why does your hair flow that way? It's what it does. Why doesn't it stick out straight like needles, like a porcupine? It doesn't. There's a natural world. Why, do apples look the same type of shape? They just do. Right? So there's a wisdom governing creation. Cords get tangled and wrap. Shem understood if you take that wisdom and you put it on your 4 garments, whatever that wisdom represents, in the mitzvahs, you see them, fine. But what I'm saying is the wisdom is in the encapsulation of the concept, tzinorot, have sticking together mechanisms, which helps you understand Kabbalah. How did Jacob do the secret with the speckled, spotted? Those were cords, channels, rods. And there's the wisdom of the rods when he would put them together. Same thing. Hanoch would say something different. His attitude is to identify wisdoms Cords, he would say, just get tangled. There's wisdom there. So if someone said, just dramatize this for whatever, hey, I need a jumbled bunch of cords over there, but I don't know how we'll do that. Chanoch would say, just throw them in a corner. Just throw them. He'd say, no, you can't just throw the cords. He'd say, throw them, they'll tangle. They say, no, we need it tangled good so you can never get them apart. Throw them there. So they would throw their computer cables over there and say, look at that. They're literally stuck. How'd you know that? Wisdom. Shem would say, I call that tzitzis. The wisdom of tzitzis. It just does it. Also, a Brit Milah knife. You ever see a circumcision? Is the moel, the guy that does it, particularly talented? Probably not. He's not a neurosurgeon. What is greater than the shochet, so to speak, is his knife and tools. In the circumcision, there's a tool that does 90% of the work. The tool is a gooey, oozing with wisdom device. You can't go wrong with the tool. Same thing with scribes, sophers. Generally, the sofer is not a great calligrapher. Though not the pen has a natural wisdom, it just works. It goes on the parchment that's prepared a certain way that grabs the pen and the ink. With the letters of Torah, they're grabbed together. The smaller the inyan, the bigger the fuss, as you say. So all those little details coming together in the halacha make for a consistency that you look at and say, it's geschmack. A Sefer Torah is geschmack. You look at it just as aesthetically beautiful. But no one was talented. Not the guy that made the parchment, the pen, the ink. But they all come together. It's amazing. That Shem would call that a Sefer Torah. Chanoch would call it little wisdoms coming together. Joseph was the master, the original master of the school of Shem and Aver. Now, Aver is the one that knows how to write the wisdom. Shem calls it tzitzis, calls it mikveh, an oral Torah. To Chanoch, wisdom. Aver says, hey, if we write it a certain way, the language, the natural ability to speak can convey power itself. That therefore Hebrew, ivrit, comes from Aver. Same linguistic. Abraham was called Avraham Ivri of the school of Shem and Aver. Joseph is called Ben Zekunim, a child of elders. He was born wise with the ability to contain all wisdom. Joseph was the master of that school. Probably the greatest that ever lived until came Moses. If Joseph was the master of that school, that's a throwback to Enochian wisdom, Metatronic wisdom. What do we say in Kol HaTorah? Joseph and Metatron are one. How did Joseph know the 70 languages when he came out of prison? Which the Abulafia commentary to Sefer Yetzirah says he didn't know 70 languages literally, also the Sanhedrin. They knew the Sod, 70 of Lashon, all language. Metatron's soul united with Joseph's soul that night, says the Arizal and Shar Gugulim. And as the Vilna Gaon says, Joseph and Metatron, they come from what's called the Neshama Zirah Elah, the highest level of soul contained in Adam in the state before the sin. All kind of code soul for wisdom. Moses then is the one that knows that wisdom too. But unlike Chanoch, Yosef, he is more Shem and Aver. Mitzvot and writing the mitzvot. Moses becomes the Sinai Shem and Aver. Joseph is your Chanoch. Abraham is your who? Also, a kind of type of Moses, Shem and Aver. There's a school of wisdom. It's one school. It always was. The Jewish people were created at Sinai. to be the nation of the mitzvot. We receive what Shem called mikvah, tzitzis, sukkis, right? The Gerim at Sinai are the people that retain the wisdom of the mitzvot. When they come together, you have a Jew performing mitzvahs with wisdom, and you have Gerim with wisdom who can then choose the mitzvot they need to do to perform and keep their wisdom alive. They come together, it's a repair of Adam and Eve in the garden without the snake coming in between. The greatest example of this is the Torah itself. Anyone who's read Aryeh Kaplan's commentary to Sefer Yetzirah knows that there's a famous thing in Torah, the Bet of Bereshit and the Lamed of Yisrael, the first and last words, first and last letters. Lamed Bet, put it together, it spells Leiv, as in the heart of Torah, Leiv. Then you look in Sefer Yetzirah, it says 32 pathways of wisdom. And there's 32 mentions of God's name in creation, Elohim, which they say is the essence of wisdom as pertaining to God himself in this world through the Tzimtzum. And we say, but that's God in this world. And God sends the channels, the Shefa in. There's that channel again. We say Hashem Hu Elohim. And the names of God go and go and go. Then you have the mastery of creation of God is named El Shaddai. El Shaddai, El Shaddai. Just all the names of God work this system of God, the God of creation. Meditating on the names, understand the reality of the wisdoms that emanate to us from God for the sake of maintaining God's creation as God created man to do so. When we look at the Torah, we see Eitz Hadas Tov Hara, tree of knowledge of good and evil. We see not the Lamed and the Bet. We translate Bereshit in the beginning. But if you look at the Targum Yonatan, it says, with wisdom, God created the world. There's what my friends in Texas call a Torah A and Torah B, or 3D and 4D. We're in 3D. Basic world, Torah B, permitted, forbidden, go left, go right. Then there's 4D and Torah A, Metatronic consciousness, that elevated consciousness, the wisdom consciousness. We see the Torah in its lower state. Here's a story of a nation wandering through a desert. Then we don't even read it in Hebrew. We just read the Art Scroll English. Translate Ger's convert. It's okay. Because we don't ascribe or assume that Moses himself had wisdom. Have you ever heard anybody in yeshiva say that Moses had wisdom? No one ever says that. We know he's a prophet, but no one actually thinks that Moses was a wise man. Because we don't have a system and culture of wisdom today. It's in exile. The Zohar is the school created to preserve and endorse that wisdom. The irony is, Moses was the same level Talmud Chacham of wisdom as Joseph. So when the Torah begins and ends with Lamed and Bet, that is not an accident. That is a remnant of the school of Shem and Aver wisdom. You probably keep Sukkot, don't you? And you think it's a nice, happy little mitzvah. We shake a little lemon and a stick and we're happy. That wisdom goes back to Shem and Aver as a throwback how to accomplish the tree of life as a daily practice or yearly cyclical practice. The nation of Israel was created at Sinai to be a nation living the Sukkot story and the mikvah story and the tzitzis story and the tefillin story and Egypt's story. That all the mitzvahs of wisdom that Shem had founded, Israel would live it out. Right? And so if I say I invent a knight, or Batman, I invent Batman. Okay? I'm the father and creator of Batman. And what I do is I have a son. And I say, son, you are going to be the Batman. And what I do is I create villains. Say I fathered 20 kids. And each kid has this one's green, we call him the Riddler. This one's the Joker. My son is the Batman. And I buy him a little suit and little gadgets, and I construct that he will have a mazel and fate to be Batman. I give him martial arts training, how to drive a car at supersonic speed, and he lives the life of Batman. Because I understood the wisdom of Batman. So too here. There's wisdom in the world. God creates the world. God creates Israel. Israel is the nation that the world cooperates with God to make Israel live out those mitzvot. They are the embodiment and living Torah Divrei Elohim Chaim. They live the wisdom. Gerim are just, they are the wisdom. They're one with the wisdom. One is living it out. One kind of ministers to it. And they both need each other. So imagine all these little things we do. We wear little undershirts. We wear phylacteries. We pray. We go into huts once a year, shake a lemon and a stick. And we do all these little funny things. Number one, they're not funny little things. If you remove the religion, they are the wisdoms of creation, the encapsulation of Metatronic wisdom through Chanoch as given to Adam in the garden. When you do them, you are investing the power of God as a garment over you, the wisdom over you, that you can emanate throughout the universe and basically connect to the power of God. Pretty cool. Moses' Torah is that. Every little trinket you do is actually one of those. We see it as a tree of knowledge of good and evil. It's just a lemon and a stick. And I have to believe that it does. But if you know the wisdom, it's not hana hana hini huna huna hana. It's Metatronic consciousness. Your body is turned to fire, so to speak. It's called the chashmal. You're elevated to the high. I mean, it's not elevated. It's literally the power of God you're connecting to. Imagine if there's a socket here, okay? Unplug means it's egotistical Dave Katz. Plug it in to divine power. I am David Pesach Belev a Cohen, and I'm ready to serve Akash Baruch Hu. Big difference. Are you just kind of like, yeah, I'm Jewish. I do my thing. You know how it is. Or are you Moshe Rabbeinu? Everybody out there has the power in them to be a Moshe Rabbeinu. Plug in. Moses gave you the Torah of how to do it. But wisdom is the on switch. Anybody can get the wisdom. You have to know it exists. You have to go after it. Solomon says go after it with everything you have, like precious diamonds and jewels. Moses did. His Torah is that. The brilliance of Moses' Torah is it doubles and looks like a boring book, non-interesting literature. If you knew the wisdom of the Torah of Moses, is it good literature? No. It is that massive Shakespearean concept. Then it's good literature. But it's the wisdom that made it good, not prose of Moses, the good storyteller. The good story that you like was like the company that makes potato chips and French fries. They sell the skins of the potatoes to companies that sell like potato skin appetizers. We're eating the appetizers of the Torah and calling it the main meal. The main meal is the main meal. So you see the Torah as Moses with a pen. Hey, everybody, it's Moses here. Pretty cool book we're doing. Tree of knowledge of good and evil. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. Religion is awesome. Is that a pen he's holding? Midrash says that Moses had the staff of God in his hand. The Zohar calls the staff Metatron. Was Moses holding a pen and paper? Or was it the Metatronic pen in his Metatronic hand, in his Metatronic body, that the initial letters Metatron Sarah Pnim spells Moshe, Mem Shin Hey, as brought by Kol HaTorah. Then when you know that, when you really know that, sandalphonic consciousness. The power from us going up, working one with God to emanate the divine Shefa response to come in this world. That is Gula Shlema Mamish. That's why Eliyahu was called Sandalphon. He's called Cohen Tzedek. Shem was called Cohen Tzedek. It's the Torah of Shem that is that Sandalphonic wisdom. Who were the four craftsmen of redemption? Mashiach ben David, mentioned Torah of Shem. Mashiach ben Yosef, Yosef. Eliyahu, Sandalphon. Cohen Tzedek, Shem. It's the ancient wisdom that is the it factor. So that Lamed and Bet is just a little hint of the school of Moses' wisdom. That the innards of Moses' Torah, Torah Moshe, is Torah Shem and Aver. It's Moses' Torah. He was the godless that wrote it with the power of Metatronic consciousness. But what was Moses writing? He was writing Ivrit, Ivri, the school of Shem, the mitzvah application of Abraham, who is a microcosmic Israel, culminated by Jacob Israel, as brought down and realized by Chanoch, going back to the garden with Adam. It's the whole fractal of Torah. We're going to close on this note. The Torah of Shem is what you can see in the front side of Zionism. Right? When David got the blessing to get the Temple Mount in Psalm 110, Atah Kohen Liolam al Dibarti Malki Tzedek. The staff of your strength will be sent from Zion. Who did that? Malki Tzedek, Shem. Zionism, Vilna Gaon, Kol Torah, 1740, Industrial Revolution, Zohar, is a Torah of Shem, is alive, the wisdom is alive. The backside of Zionism also is playing by this rule. Call it the status quo. You'll hear Bibi Netanyahu talking about Israel is dedicated to the status quo. We hear that today in our vulgar English. We think, okay, Bibi doesn't want to make a fuss. Isn't that what you think? Doesn't want to make a ruckus. Then I found out status quo was the separation of church and state in the Israeli government and its inception in 1947. Then I find out today, status quo started when the Vilna Gaon wrote Kol Torah, 1740, 6 a.m. on the paradigm clock when the Gula started. Did you know that? The Ottoman Empire ruled Palestine, correct? The church in Rome had fallen apart. Rome did. And the church wanted its relics of holy sites in ancient Palestine. They petitioned the Ottomans saying, we want our stuff back. The Jews, when Zionism started, said, we want our stuff back. And the Ottomans were saying, who's is whose? As it says by Abraham and Melchizedek, mi noten lami, who gave to who? At the infamous place of Abraham and Shem on the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount is who gave to who. The Sharia law of Jerusalem wrote official law status quo that was indoctrinated in what would become the Palestinian mandate, the British mandate. The British mandate stated the Jews will return to their land. One of the stipulations, Article 14, they must set up a committee to understand which holy places belong to what. So this whole Palestinian statehood you hear about, it is simply the remnant of the Ottoman Empire preserved by the British Empire, funded and motivated by the Christian Empire to find out whose stuff belongs to who. They wanted the Jews to figure it out. That is already Chanoch wisdom. You heard it? It's a lot of wisdoms. Shem wisdom says they invented a word in the 1700s called status quo. They agreed not to shake the status quo of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire ruled where? Palestine. What is this Palestinian state? None other than the Temple Mount itself. For the sake of what? Status quo of holy places. When they say the Jews stole it, what do they mean? The Jews are taking the holy sites and not giving them back as per Article 14, British mandate from the Ottoman Empire. It's a completely fake political story that it began in the 1700s. The Jewish claim is the temple goes back to Judea, Solomon, David. Two different storylines. So how come the news can't report the truth? Because that would already be a breach of the status quo. To say what it is a breach in the status quo. So when Bibi says status quo, see what he means? He's saying, yeah, I'm talking 1740. We hear it like 2015. Right under your nose. Torah of Shem is what was there the whole time, right under your nose, and you never saw it. Whether it was Aver, Peleg, prophecy, Torah Moshe, from Lamed Bet to the ancient wisdom, 32 pathway, all these things. That's what the Torah of Shem is. There's a new system, just like the new status quo. Religion, rabbinics. Torah of Shem is a throwback to the original system. Cohen, Levi, Israel, Ger, Shofet, Navi, King, Sanhedrin, Beit HaMikdash, Har Zion, Eretz Yisrael, Ger Toshav, geocentrism, Jerusalem, Zion, Torah from Zion, Mazel, Shefa, Atzilos, Kabbalah, Bria, Metatron, Sinophin, Raziel, Adam Arishon, Adam Kadmon. You name it. That is the system. That is the Torah of Shem system. The Torah of Moshe was written on those premises. We have sunk into exile where the system is rejected. That system is called Chochmah, wisdom. Today we want dot, knowledge. The Geula is when we embrace our wisdom. Because you might call me Rabbi David Katz, but that my real name is David Pesach ben Leib HaKohen, emphasis on HaKohen. Everybody out there has an identity in the real system, a place in the temple, a place in Sion, a Kabbalistic soul that can give insight to God. All these things. We are divorced and frowned upon from wisdom. But there's a school of wisdom that never died. And it was instituted at the time of the Chorban Beis HaMikdash called the Zohar. The Zohar is the school that keeps wisdom alive. And every great rabbi is subscribed to the Zohar. The Vilna Gaon, Arizal, every rabbi today that's legitimate believes in the authenticity of the Zohar. They might not learn it, they might not study it, but what it represents is somewhere, just like in the redemption, when it comes, we will all know there's a temple and a Kohen Gadol doing the avoda. If you just knew that in the back of your mind, the world's fixed. Just knowing there's a Zohar, just knowing there's a remnant of wisdom, keeps the world going and the Shekhinah alive in exile, keeps the sparks of creation nourished, even though evil is nourished at the same time through the Noga. There is wisdom in the world. It's hiding from you in the Tzimtzum. God is hiding it as the challenge of man. And it comes out in the backside called the status quo. In our time period, it's called the status quo. What it really means is to find the truth, get to wisdom, and you'll find out through history, nothing ever changed. It was always about the Temple Mount. But you have to get there through wisdom to understand it. And on that note, I give everyone a bracha. May we be sent the staff of your strength from Zion, the Torah coming out from Zion. May we be zoche to a Gula Shlema, the light of the Oregon news which stemmed from the Torah of Shem, all the way back from the garden. The wisdom of Eden may prevail soon in our days. Amen.